like to have some quiet time, and then we'll enter into our discussion for today. And today's topic, as you can see, is practicing patience with others, right? Last week was a tougher discussion, but we are going to do one more thing related to last week, patience with ourselves. And then we'll go on to patience with others, which I think this is one area we all really could use maybe a little help at times. Good morning. So let's have a moment of prayer. I'll just let Sue have a seat. No, it's okay. And hello to everyone watching online. Thank you. So let us pray. Above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. Above all, trust in the slow work of God. Amen. Amen. And that was written by a priest and mystic of the 20th century, Teilhard de Chardin. Some of you may know some of his books. And this was from something called Hearts on Fire, one of his writings. Okay, so let's take a moment. We've all sort of rushed in last second, and we have a busy day ahead. Some of us have a very busy day ahead. So let's take some time now, a couple of minutes, just to catch our breath. And as we have done the last two sessions, we're going to just relax, sit in a way that feels good for you. Back straight usually helps because it helps with the breathing. Your hands could be on your lap, on the table, whatever feels comfortable. And about 4 times, I'm going to ask you to breathe in slowly and hold your breath for a few seconds, and then slowly breathe out. So you're going to breathe in, healing and light and love, and you're going to hold it and then breathe out, impatience, frustration, fears, angers, anything you need to let go of. So let's do that about 4 times, and then we'll sit in silence for another minute or two, and then we'll come back and open our eyes. So let's start with breathing. So slowly breathe in and hold. And then breathe out slowly. So now take a minute to just quietly finish off your breathing and open your eyes when you're ready. Okay. Most of you back. Did we lose anyone in the moment? So, how did it go after last Tuesday with the remaining days through the reflections? Did anyone have anything that came up that you'd like to share? Something you weren't sure of, something that was maybe a new insight, whatever that you would like to share within the group. Because remember, whatever insights you have may be important to someone else around you. Anything? Did anyone write or journal anything or any comments as they went through that, the other sessions? Joyce?
What hit me was grieving and patience. And the reason is because I asked my dear friend here to have Christmas dinner with us. And I was getting impatient waiting for her to answer. And this gave me the idea of, no, be patient. She'll come and say yes or no when she's decided what her answer will be.
Okay. So when we are impatient with someone else, this is a question. What does it say about you?
I'd be a micromanager.
A micromanager?
Control. Patient with yourself.
Yeah.
That you're impatient with yourself?
No, I think it has to do with control also.
Yes.
Control. That would go with the micromanager side too, yeah, so control.
Places your importance above theirs.
Your importance above theirs.
What I was thinking is that it was my concern for Gail that she wouldn't be by herself.
Right.
And my answer to that was that right now I'm so fragile, I need to be by myself.
Okay.
Which I understand when she told me that.
So when she told you that, now I'm not using you as a specific
No,
we're
example,
fine.
but since you
Okay,
talked, this is
we're
good,
fine.
because I think we could all relate to some of this. So when she told you that, so you were, sort of like, well, when's she gonna let me know? I got these plans, I got things to do, if I need to have extra food, like all those things go through our minds, right?
Mm-hmm.
When she told you that she needs time more for herself, what was your reaction to that? And I'm just curious because it's part of our own learning here. So what was your reaction?
My reaction, and I believe what I said to you is that's fine.
So that's fine.
That's fine, yes.
Okay.
It was fine with me that she came to a conclusion that was good
Right.
for her.
Okay.
It was a hard decision because I enjoyed being with Joyce, but
And she'd also meet my two sisters.
what?
You'd also meet my two sisters.
Right. But it's just, I was fine last year on my own, and I need that
Okay.
time.
So you're not going to dinner?
No.
Free meal, I'd go for that.
Probably any other time I would. As you can tell, I've never missed a meal.
And that's like she just said, probably any other time
Right.
would be fine. And if I plan on inviting her to join
Mhm.
the three of us at another time, but not during the holiday time when she's so fragile.
There's so much going on, right? I mean, that's why we also have the Blue Christmas service. There's a lot of reasons that people aren't always as joyful this time of year. And it's learning to be patient with others who feel that way when we're, because sometimes people might say, oh, come on out to the party, or come on out and let's, go out shopping or go out to a restaurant. So it's being aware. It's really listening and being aware of other people. Yes, Edna?
I like the word that Gail used, of being fragile.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of us in our community are fragile this time of the year. And maybe year round, but particularly now.
Well, if you have a chance, if you could turn back, we'll go back to Thursday, December 9th. And that's on page 26. I was actually wanting to talk about this because it was after last week's session, right? We didn't get to it yet. All of you should have read it. And if, as you read it, the daily reflections, and are honest with what you're reading, there should be something emotion-wise or other thoughts and feelings coming out of some of these reflections. The one on December 9th was grieving and patience. We grieve for many reasons. It's not always because we've lost a loved one. We grieve, we're grieving right now, we're still in a pandemic. We thought we were getting ahead of it, and it's surging again, a new variant. Some people who were planning to go fly away or drive somewhere to be with family, are not doing it, even though they had plans, and this will be the second year. There's a lot of sadness around that. There's all kinds of reasons that people grieve. And this time of year, again, everyone's supposed to be happy and cheery and all that, and watch the Hallmark movies on TV, and and all that good stuff. For me, one of my favorites is the Muppet Christmas Carol. It's one of my best. That's one of my best. I watched it on Sunday afternoon. It was great. Yeah. Anyway. But Scott Stoner, who is the one who wrote the reflection, he said, that grief is the uninvited guest at every holiday gathering. It's there, for whatever reason. A relationship breakup, a loss of a job, a loss of a friend or a loved one. There's all kinds of reasons, again, that people grieve, and as we are now in the second Christmas of the pandemic, it's bringing out yet again a lot of grief for different reasons. And he makes a comment that we need to be patient with ourselves. We need to be patient with ourselves and the process of grieving. So this, of course, was last week was about patience with ourselves, right? That was the theme. But with this week, it's also about being patient with others who are going through grief and loss or whatever, for whatever reason. Let's take a few minutes. I think it's an important enough topic because everyone is touched by it in one way or another. And it might even, again, be I moved to a new location, I'm missing all my friends, or whatever, So let's take about 7 or 8 minutes and just talk. How can we be patient with ourselves at this time of year as we experience a whole range of emotions, of which grief, as Scott Stoner says, is the uninvited guest at the holiday times? And then how can we be patient with others? How do we recognize that we need to be patient with others and maybe either support them? How do we support them? But if they don't want support and they want to be alone, how do we deal with that? A lot of times we are geared for wanting to do, right? But sometimes we need to also just realize we have to step back. So 7, 8 minutes, or maybe a few minutes more, if you could discuss it, and then at the end of it, let's have one person from each table just share 1 or 2 thoughts from the discussion. And then after that, we'll head on to this week's full topic. I hope your discussions discovered some areas that we all have to be patient with ourselves when it comes to grief. And I know at the one table I was sitting at, there's all kinds of grief. There's all kinds of grief, and sometimes it's circumstances that are beyond our control that we have to be very patient with, and then patient with our own feelings of how we're now dealing with something that's gone on or been delayed or whatever's happening, and it's hard. You know, it's hard. Last year when there was the actual lockdowns and people were forced to be inside, you know, that forced a lot of people to really look at their lives, look at friendships, and look at the world very differently. We're not, at least here in southern Arizona, in a lockdown situation, but a lot is being affected. A lot is being affected by the current health situation. So, from each table, if we could have maybe one thing. Sorry, I don't have my wireless mic, so I'm going to have to put this down. It's learning patience with audio systems. Okay, how about this table here?
Well,
Is there something?
one thing that came up about trying to understand someone else who's in grief, and the best way to understand that perhaps is to listen carefully as one can. So listening is a key to perhaps understanding the other person's grief.
Okay. So understanding other person by listening.
By listening.
Don't learn anything by doing.
There are a lot of people who just do not listen. Stop to listen.
Yeah. Well, we had, in terms of listening, the Legend series, for those who didn't participate, was all about listening. And many times, and one of the examples that was given, I don't remember what session it was, people are listening only because they're waiting to get their own input in. And they're not really listening. It's sort of like, okay, let the person talk, Now it's my turn. And they've never even heard anything the other person said.
Oh, absolutely.
So yes, that's very true. So this is important. To understand another person, we have to listen. And understand where they're coming from, what they're going through, what are the circumstances that might be creating some impatience on our part, perhaps. Thank you. How about at this table, anything? One thing maybe?
I think we spoke a lot about loss of loved ones and trying to get through the grieving process by spending time alone, but maybe spending time with others, but then still having to go back to our own homes or to our own living situation, and it sort of is, the world comes down on a person again, that how the grieving is affecting the person. I don't know if I'm saying that very understandably.
So when there is a loss of a loved one, how can we be patient with ourselves? You know, learning to be patient of someone else going through it is a whole other thing, right? But what about ourselves? How can we be patient with ourselves? What are the things that we can do to address that? And one, I know Gail had already mentioned, sometimes you need to be alone.
Spending time with your thoughts and feelings.
You know, time alone might be one way of dealing with that.
I think another one is being grateful for the time you have with that person.
Right.
Being grateful. So that helps to look back, recount, and yeah. Okay, Joyce, and then we'll go on to the next table.
I'm going to bring up a book. It's called Good Grief. It's a very small little book.
Good grief.
It talks of the steps of grief. It also tells you that although the steps in the book are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, don't think that you're going to go through them in that order, but you can go through 1 and 2, and then all of a sudden you're in number 5, and then the next day you're back at number 1. And it's all part of the grieving process.
Yeah.
And be patient with yourself to allow yourself to do this. I've recommended that
So-
book to many, many people.
So those watching online, if you didn't hear all that, the book is called Good Grief, and it's addressing steps of grieving. And remember, steps of grieving, and many who went through clinical pastoral education years ago, we had to read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book.
Yes, right.
However, even she discovered it's not a process like this. And some may not have number 2 or 3 or whatever, and it's not necessarily in any order. Yeah. Okay.
She also said that it's not stages of grief, it's stages of dying that she's talking about.
Stages of
And
dying.
people get that confused.
Yeah.
They think Kubler-Ross is talking about grief, and she's not. Not that they aren't interwoven, but she was talking about stages of dying.
Stages of dying, the people going through the dying. And again, the people were all different. There was a sort of a general sense, just the same way grief, personal grief, there are kind of like a process, but not everyone's the same. So, now, since you were talking, Deacon Becky, what about your table? Did anything that you'd like to
Dates
share?
were either important or brought back not necessarily bad memories. Sometimes it was good. Carolyn said that her husband had 2 birthdays. The day he was born and the day he died was another birthday. And others talked about difficulty with a particular date or a particular month because that's when their loved one died, or it was the same month as their birthday. One person talked about her dad was born on the 25th of December and died on the 24th.
Oh, wow.
And so she said actually Christmas Eve is harder than Christmas Day.
Wow. Okay.
And the other thing we talked about was a lot about control and being patient with yourself, especially for me when I was caring for Sue. I realized how much control I didn't have. I thought I was fully in it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I realized that this is out of my hands.
So loss of control in that circumstances that are beyond our control, right? Right.
And that's hard to accept when you're an in-control person,
Right.
to let
Right.
it go and let God, which is what when I would finally, run up against the brick wall and, oh, for heaven's sake, let go and let God. He's in charge, not you.
Yeah. How about way at the back there?
Our comments really came around with the issue of getting more patients dealing with the medical profession. And it could be the doctor.
Okay.
Wow.
It could have been, you were locked out of the room as your wife died because she had COVID and they wouldn't let you even touch the window on the other side of her. All of those things make it very hard to be patient in tough situations like those.
So patient with hospitals, doctors, etc. How about insurance companies?
Yeah.
Insurance. So, yeah. And again, some of that is also the beyond our control stuff, and having to comply with rules that we don't want. And some of the hardest. Whoops, I'll use this now. Some of the hardest parts about COVID were people who were not able to be with loved ones when they were sick. They were sometimes allowed, maybe literally, in the last hour of someone's life. And I know for me, as a pastor, the hardest part was when I wasn't even allowed to go into a hospital. And I was reduced to doing prayers over a cell phone in someone's ear because I wasn't allowed to be there as she was dying. Like that. So I had to go through a whole bunch of personal things dealing with that. And I wasn't even family. I wasn't a family dealing with that. But me, you know, again, as the one who's meant to be the pastor, and I am the pastor, I couldn't be there. However, I also had to be patient with the system
Yes.
and realize I could still be present in different ways, even if it is just a phone call. So it's a whole adjustment. Yeah. Edna?
What is your status right now then?
Well,
Are
most
you allowed
hospitals
in?
do allow you in, yes. You still have to check in and do all that good stuff. But most hospitals so far, at least here, again, I can't speak for other states and cities, are allowing clergy in.
Good.
But you do have to be vaccinated and so on.
What about the hospital chaplains? Are they still allowed, were they allowed in when?
If it was an actual staff chaplain,
Right.
not a volunteer from the
No, no, I'm
neighborhood,
talking
but
about-
actual, yes, they were, yes. So some people were allowed to, did have chaplains from a staff go to see a loved one.
I wondered about that, because
But their own clergy weren't allowed to
They
go.
were very present
Yeah.
with George, but that was before
Yeah.
COVID, so.
Right. How about this table last?
Well, the thing, well, there were two things, but one that I was talking about was grieving because I'm not able to go and give some moral assistance to my sister, who, she and her husband are both in assisted living. Her husband is sliding away, and so she has to observe that. And the number of employees is reduced because they've come down with COVID. And so some of the rooms are completely locked out. Nobody can go in there except employees, and they have to put on the full guard just to bring them a meal. The dining room is closed. And those kinds of things I know are extremely difficult. And talk about patience. That's my sister. Because she is able to, thankfully, able to say, there's no way to predict. We just have to go day by day. And sometimes it's moment by moment. And sometimes she has to help her husband, do his nails because there's no employee they don't have the employees because some of them have come down with COVID. And, so it's a very difficult situation. And so my impatience is that I can't go there. They're on lockdown. And the business of going from here to Albany, Oregon would be quite a trip. And so we just talk on the phone a lot, 2 or 3 times a week. And that's helpful to her. And I can communicate with my other siblings, and that helps them. So as a family, we can keep holding them in prayer.
Right. And
And
that
we
ties
have-
into a lot of this type of stuff up here.
Yes.
Right.
We have to give thanks for when I was in my 20s, we couldn't make phone calls because they were so expensive, and you had to call at 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night before 6 in the morning, and you
Long
couldn't-
distance phone calls
and-
cost
yeah.
more.
And so there was no communication, so that's something that we can be grateful for, that we have cell phones, that we have constant communication. When my son was in a war zone the first time, Desert Storm, there was no communication except snail
Right.
mail. Then when I could just email him and get a response the second time when he was over, and it was what a relief, so that the ability to be able to talk.
Exactly.
So be grateful for those small things, that
Yes.
even though, like if I can't be there, at
Right.
least call and
But at
be
least
there.
you
Yeah.
can talk.
And
Yeah.
we're both very grateful for that.
Yeah.
So we do
Mhm.
communicate frequently.
Mhm.
Yes.
but it's learning to be patient through all circumstances and situations, right? Now, I'd like to move ahead. This has been great. I think it was important to touch on some of last week's topic because being patient with ourselves has such an impact on how we're patient with other people, right? So I wanted to turn to yesterday's reflection on page 31, and it's the beginning of the practicing patience with others. And again, it just happens to be Scott Stoner, who is the one doing the reflection yesterday. He uses a quote at the beginning of his day reflection by Paulo, I don't know if it's Coelho. It says, "Why is patience important? Because it makes us pay attention." Why is patience important? Because it makes us pay attention. So, being patient with other people is not always a gift of some people. And some of it comes down to we want to get moving on something, perhaps. It's not always a negative reason we have impatience. We just want to see things happen. The whole thing about when is church going to change? You've heard that before. When are the churches going to change? Well, it's like you've probably heard the example of it's like, trying to turn around a big giant ocean liner. It doesn't happen. You can't just turn it. It's a process. It takes a long time. Just ask the people on the Titanic. It didn't happen. It takes a long time. We get impatient with others because we want to see things happen. And some of it comes out of what we talked about last week, perfectionism. I can be a perfectionist at times, and I've had to learn how to pull back and let others do. You can't be the rector of a parish and not let people do things. First of all, it would kill you because you couldn't do it all. But that's not how an organization runs. People have to take ownership. And it's hard at times. When I want to get to, here, and everyone's over here, that long process because of who I am, my personality, is hard. And I have to sit back and just go through that process. Does anyone experience that before? Do you know what that's like? So being patient with others really is learning to be patient with ourselves too. Being patient with others also is about how something in that other person just triggers something in you. And we talked a little bit about that last week, that whole psychology thing about reflection, right? You see something in that person that may irritate you or whatever it is, but a lot of times it's coming out of your own self. And impatience with someone else may be more a reflection of impatience with yourself. Do you agree with that or disagree with that? Yeah. Oh, Deacon Becky.
When I was going through the diaconate process, the first year I was put on hold because they felt like I had some issues, and I think going through that year taught me more about patience, of not having control. It was out of my control, and people kept saying, "Have patience with the process." And it's like,
Have patience with the process.
I mean, when I decided to be a deacon, I was like, okay, I'm ready.
Right, exactly.
Now, it'll be a few years,
Yeah.
and then they tacked another year on.
Right.
So I think I learned patience.
Yeah.
A
A little bit. Can anyone relate to or would like to share a story maybe similar to what Deacon Becky just shared?
I see my granddaughter she's 11 going on 23.
11 going on 23.
Just this, and I just want to smack her down, and I look at her and I go, oh my gosh, that was me.
Oh, you saw yourself in her, right?
Ooh, and I
Okay.
step back and be loving, but that's
Uh-huh.
the patience that I'm learning
Uh-huh.
from her, because this behavior, is intolerable, and I'm like, and then, oh.
So you realize how others had to deal with you when you were young.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I constantly
All right.
tell my parents in heaven how apologetic I am.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've shared it sometimes, but I haven't shared it here, I don't think. But when I was in elementary school, I wasn't always good.
Bulletin.
Okay? And I always feel sorry. I wish I could meet her one day. My grade 5 teacher. Sorry, my grade 4 teacher. My grade 4 teacher. She had lots of patience, but she used to cry a lot.
Over you?
And it was always every Thursday evening she would call my parents to share the events of the week. Yeah. However, we did make friends at like Christmas time. We did. So yeah, it's interesting when we see in others, especially in younger people, and something might sort of trigger in us, and then you realize, oh my, that was me. Right. So, Scott Stoner on yesterday's session says, whatever we pay attention to is what will grow. And that was around the middle of the page.
Yes.
Whatever we pay attention to is what will grow. If we pay more attention to what annoys or concerns us about someone and how they are not living up to our expectations, our impatience with that person will grow. Okay? So if we pay more attention to what annoys or concerns us about someone and how they are not living up to our expectations, our impatience with that person will grow. So let's take just a few minutes to talk about that. Do you agree with it? Can you think of some examples that maybe have happened to you, or maybe you were part of the issue? So let's take a few moments and discuss that. Everyone ready? It was interesting. It was very interesting to hear some conversation. So whatever we pay attention to is what will grow. And if we pay more attention to what annoys or concerns us in other people, then our impatience with that person will grow. And I think that's so true. Anyone quick sharing? Just quick sharing. We're already coming towards the end of our morning, but just some quick thoughts out of each table. Edna?
Well, I think this class has been very helpful in this particular topic that we're doing, and issues that David and I have been dealing with.
So this study is helping to address some of the issues that Edna's dealing with herself. It's helping her work through. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think too, when you concentrate on what aggravates you about somebody,
Right.
You don't, in the end, you don't see the rest of them. And you don't appreciate anything about them. I mean, that's all,
Right.
you're waiting for that trigger, and then
Yes.
it's all over.
It's easy to fall into that trap, because yes, you're waiting for the trigger that you can then jump down their throat too. Right? It happens. Happens in meetings. It happens in all organizations. It happens in home. Happens in families. You know, I think one thing, I won't go into detail, but one thing that was mentioned at this table, which I think everyone can relate to, is impatience with family. Family members. It may be a sibling, it may be a spouse, it may be a grandchild, perhaps. Because on one side, we want to see the best for everybody. Well, we hope we do. But we get impatient. And I think one thing that we can probably relate to is impatience with people who are indecisive. Especially if they're family members. We want them to get on with their life. And, you know, they're sort of, well, not sure what to do, this and that. And boy, can we get impatient with that. And then impatience can turn to anger. That's the other side of it. There's a very fine line between impatience and anger. Right? Or impatience and unhappiness and, well, there's many things I'm sure we can talk about. Any other things we want to quickly share from your discussions? The parts of someone that we focus on the negative instead of a positive, the annoying things, the things that concern us. Anyone want to share anything? Any experience, any story?
The issue of positive reinforcement.
Right.
And the idea that whether you're talking about a child in the classroom or the teacher, behavior changes if you can give them positive reinforcement about something they're doing well.
Positive reinforcement. And that's what Scott Stoner said too, right? So if our focus is no longer just on what annoys us with someone else, but on something that's good, whatever it is, everyone has something good that we can find in them, right? And when we focus on that, our patience with that person changes. Because we're not just dwelling on the negatives and annoying and whatever. But it doesn't happen overnight. It's also about how do I change how I deal with someone else. So again, it still comes back to ourselves. How we relate to someone else, you know, patience with other people, we still have to be able to understand our own motives, what makes us who we are, and how we relate to other people. Because again, sometimes what may annoy us in someone else is really what annoys us in ourselves, or something we wish we were good at. We get annoyed with people because we feel that we're not, you know, maybe quietly, we may not admit it, that, boy, I wish I could do that. I wish I was like that person. But instead of seeing it in a positive way, this person has maybe a strength or a gift, we turn it into a negative and we hate the person. But that's how little kids treat other kids. But it doesn't change when we grow up. It just comes out differently. Right? So a patience with others really is tied very closely to a patience with ourselves and how we relate to other people. So, well, we're just about at the end. But what I'd like you to do as we go through the week, I'd like you to really look at the end of each reflection where it says making it personal. Those are the sections which you can use for your own personal reflection and writing down some thoughts. Because whoever's doing the daily reflection will sort of summarize something in that making it personal section. And that's every day. So when you're going through the week, so today is love is patient, today's theme. You know, can you think of a time when you acted with patience, for example? So if you haven't read today's session, you know, take the time. These are meant for you. Again, they're to help you as you kind of work through some of the whole issues and needs and the topic of patience. So Wednesday, tomorrow, when you get to it, have patience. Don't jump to it quickly. Right? You don't want to look at the back of the book and see the end of the story before you get there. Now tell me the truth, who's ever done that? Who's ever looked at the back of a book?
I don't think.
Okay, yeah. For those watching online, if you can't see, there's a lot of hands. Okay, so tomorrow's will be listening and patience. Listening, we talked about that briefly today. Thursday is about gentleness, peace, and patience. And we'll ask you, has there ever been times you've responded with impatience and rudeness towards someone else? And there's some of these reflection topics are, they're very personal, and you need to be honest with yourself as you go through them. And then Friday is trust in the slow work of God. The slow work of God. And Saturday is notice, listen, and practice. And then next week, we will talk about patience with God. There is that part of us that has an impatience to God's plans, the process. We want things to happen. And we get very impatient with God. We get angry with God. And we turn away from God. That's the easy thing to do. Because we don't see God right in front of us, it's easy just to say, walk away. So we'll talk a bit about that next week. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, all those watching online. Let's finish with a prayer. Have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms, and like books written in a foreign language. Do not now look for the answers. They cannot now be given to you because you could not live them. It is a question of experiencing everything. At present, you need to live the question. Perhaps you will gradually, without even noticing it, find yourself experiencing the answer some distant day. Amen.
Okay, what?
Thank you.
Remember the name of